Well, welcome back.
Yes, welcome back.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Welcome back to Fresh Perspectives.
Yes.
And today,
We have an amazing
I
guest.
have an amazing guest.
And a friend to
and
us.
A friend to us. Yes,
Yes, so
definitely
we're
a
very
friend to us.
excited. Marc
Barrington.
Woo!
We're glad to have you here.
Yes.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yep. So we're going to talk a little bit about, because Marc ran this program, I just want to say it started in January, February?
I think so, yeah.
And we were very excited about it, and we thought, oh, this would be great to have Marc come and just we can kind of talk through some of what he was bringing to the table.
Yes, but before we start there, kind of introduce yourself. Some
Please
people
do.
don't know who you are, Marc.
I think I've been here at Green River about 7 years, hired into the English division to teach a integrated reading and writing class primarily, but I also teach composition, both 101, 126 primarily, literature on occasion.
Okay, great. And you've been here. So did you come in 2018-ish?
I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
I always have to go back and sort of look through a calendar to figure out how
figure
long I've been here.
How long you've been here?
All right, so you must have started around the same time I did then, because
I remember we actually met in a meeting run by Jamie Fitzgerald, brainstorming about this facility, this center.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Ooh, you remember that. I remember that now.
I'm like, there's another Marc in the room.
There's another Marc in the room. Cool. All right, well, we're so glad you're here.
Yes. Thank
you.
And I think really, and you know me, I have to have some notes.
Bring them on out.
So Marc did an amazing job facilitating, and this was, give us a little bit more background. Is this based on some research that you
I could probably approach this several different ways.
Okay.
During the pandemic and post the murder of George Floyd, I was watching lots of media, social media, and other sort of places where a lot of my white peers would say, I want to do something, but I'm not sure what to do. And often they would turn to black and brown people and say, help me, what do you want from me? And the response is usually, you need to figure this out yourself. This is your mess, in essence. And at the same time also, I was in the kitchen once with my wife, and my wife's like, your love language is this, service. And I thought, okay. And I started to imagine, like, love languages are something that we all sort of internally know.
Right.
They're not necessarily based on science, but we all have a sense of love languages if you're of a certain age. And I thought to myself, could I map actionable anti-racist practice to someone's love language?
Okay.
And that's was the germ of the idea.
Okay, all right. And you used bell hooks kind of as a
Absolutely,
base.
yeah. I mean, I was very interested coming to Green River when I learned that Green River was attempting to be anti-racist. That really appeals to me. And I really believe strongly in grounding any sort of research or work I do in black scholarship, black feminist scholarship in particular. So I didn't want to just come at this with my own ideas. I wanted to ground them in something. And I've been really curious about a bell hooks book called Love. I'm not actually going to even say the title right at this point, but it was about love, platonic love primarily. And I started to think, like, what could it look like for me to identify love language points in her book?
In her book, yeah. Okay, all right, that's great. Yeah, I know I tried to attend all of them. And the conversation was so rich. One of the things that I know that when we met with you to just kind of start talking through some of this, we talked about, and you've already kind of mentioned it, like some of your white colleagues. So how are they, how did they kind of react to this?
Really positively. I mean, I'm sort of part of a large group of co-leaders of the White Accountability Caucus. I'm one of many, and I'm not doing anywhere near as much of the heavy lifting as some of my peers are doing. But it's been positive. Yeah. Okay. And there's also probably silence as well, like where you think maybe, I would hope maybe more people might not so much be focused on me or what I'm doing, but just the notion of it. I think that unless something happens in the news or the media, the focus on being anti-racist and being pro-black with respect to our classroom or our other spaces has diminished significantly.
Yeah. Okay. That's unfortunate.
I love the simplification of like love language, because I think everyone knows what that is, right? You don't have to give definitions like we used to do when it came to like in the peak of COVID and what was going on with Black Lives Matter, like defining what anti-Blackness was, right? Defining what equity was, defining what diversity was. And I think that love language, everyone understands a basic level of what is my natural gifts that I already have, that how can I use it to amplify different cultures and different people that I don't always understand.
Right.
But how do I support them? How do I stand in the gap? How do I actually provide, in a sense, community? Right? Like, that's what I loved about what you opened up. You opened a space for community that I don't think a lot of my white peers understand what community is. And so there's like this sense, even in Black community, where no matter where you're at, there's couple things that we all can like get around as community, right? It can be from church, it can be like having a Black mama and what they say. I've seen so many memes that I sent Mimi. I was like, isn't this funny that when you go to someone's house, your mama tell you like, you better not act up. And me and her laughed about it because, you know, we understood that in our culture of how our Black mothers are represented, right? And so you bringing love language is a commonality in a space for white people to say, I can get on board and create a community space on this. Because I think that that's been the crisis a lot of not knowing who they are.
Right, I totally agree. It's very, very hard I think for white people generally to form community with their peers, meaningful community, in a sense to maybe do this work. It's like what's the American ethos is like being an individual, and we think about like how white people come from all over the world, and many have been born here for generations, but we've all sort of assimilated into kind of whiteness, which strips us of other aspects of our identities, our backgrounds, our heritage, and whiteness is sort of, it's nondescript, or it's amorphous. And I think that contributes to the lack of being able to form community beyond, we're both white. Yeah.
It's really interesting, and we're not going to go too far off subject, but the idea of whiteness, and I can't remember what I was reading. I obviously read way too much, and I can't remember everything. But like the Irish when they came here, they weren't considered, it's like at some point they had to get included at some point, but they were looked down upon, then there were other Italians were the same. They were looked down upon when they came over into this country. And so I just find it really interesting when we talk about the idea of whiteness that people have been invited into the white.
Invited in, but you've got to leave some things at the door. You have to leave some of your background.
Yeah.
Several groups in America will be like, I'm Irish American, I'm Italian American, but many people, even some of my students, when we talk about language and identity, they're like, but I'm white, and I can't go beyond I'm white.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that is to our detriment.
Yep, I agree.
But there's some commonality with that. Like like for me, I can say I am Black, but tracing where my ancestors actually from Africa, that is totally different. And I think that's the crisis in white America, not understanding like your Irish roots and what does that mean? Because there's some rich history in there that has been stripped. And it's almost like whiteness, as you say, some of it was left out the door. You were stripped some of your culture, not knowing your identity and who you are, and to be celebrated. So when people go like, oh my goodness, St. Patrick's Day, like and I'm Irish, and I'm like, they don't understand all the history of their people. And it's almost like I don't have to, because I was told I leave that at the door. I'm learning white American history, and this is my history and my culture.
And this is my privilege.
My other favorite, Amanda, our colleague, we were discussing things during the pandemic, and I was talking about having an accent when we first came to this country, and how and the food my mother cooked or my mom cooked, and how these things made me sort of feel apart from my peers. I was just a kid, And Amanda basically said, you seem to have assimilated into whiteness in order to to be able to connect. And that meant losing my accent, not honoring or uplifting or the foods that we would eat in the home that might have been different, that I would maybe be embarrassed about, or because of the names we give them or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So when that was shared with you, what did it conjure up anything?
It made a lot of sense, but I also it made sense to me, and it wasn't sort of said in a demeaning way, but it was just mostly like, oh, I get it. Right, yeah.
You actually were able to connect with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I wonder sometimes if more of our white colleagues, if they were to think through that, if that would change how they approach, say, anti-Blackness or other cultures, or I'm just throwing that out. I don't know if having a connection to something. I've also heard people say things like, that the white folks don't have a culture.
I hear that too.
I've heard that.
I hear that too, and
I don't
understand. I don't know what that means.
I don't either.
Because I think because of this idea of assimilation, right? We leave things sort of at the door, as it were, to sort of like benefit from white privilege. And so Irish Americans were not seen as white, and then I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but at some point, whiteness sort of invited the Irish in, perhaps to keep the numbers up, because that's a factor. And many Irish people who have roots in Ireland are just further removed from it through that process of assimilation, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And I think that's where the loss of culture comes in.
Yeah.
That's where the loss of culture comes.
And community. That's where I'm like, I get why we have Jewish neighborhoods, because they're trying to keep their community. And yes, people can disagree of how everything about that, but they're trying to reserve their community. And there's in some states, like there's an Italian community, like reserving their community in this space of America, like their identity, and there's a proudness. And it's interesting, like it's okay for them, but when Black people try to get their identity, this becomes anti-Blackness, this becomes racism, this becomes DEI, in a sense of
it's a threat.
Us trying to come back to our communities and root ourselves in that. And so it's just different of how you move about in the perception of what community is okay and what community is not.
You maybe think of that book that I haven't read, but the title always struck me. It's like, why are all the Black kids sitting in the lunchroom together? You know, it's for many reasons, right? But one of them is community, commonality, and to push back against sort of the whiteness that might make being at school uncomfortable, or harmful.
Yeah, I used to run into that in past life in corporate offices where there were not very many of us. And we would see each other in the hallway, and we would stand and talk for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden somebody would say, "Oh, we got to break up because they'll think, they're going to think something's going on, or there's a conspiracy." And I'm like, I don't care, So that it's funny how that translates even going into a corporate structure, that there's still that kind of feeling like we can't be seen talking to each other for any length of time or too long.
You remind me of something I was doing during the pandemic. I was basically eavesdropping on Black culture. I was reading The Root. I was reading Very Smart Brothers. One of the journalists was Damon Young, I believe. Just because I didn't want to sort of like tax my peers, say, hey, Mark, can you tell me about X? I wanted to just learn more about my peers, right, in ways that didn't sort of cause additional labor for them.
Right.
And so I learned about things like what you just described.
Yeah. That's very interesting. One of the practices that you shared with us was acts of service. And what you shared with us within that, talking about our core value is accountability. We must be accountable to the communities experiencing disadvantages due to structural racism and oppression. Our acts must center and elevate Black voices if we are to address campus anti-Blackness. And then you have a quote from Martin Luther King. White Americans must recognize that justice for Black people cannot be achieved without radical changes in the structure of our society, which I absolutely love. Let's talk a little bit about this, just in terms of how do we do this in acts of service?
Well, I mean, the Black Caucus many years ago gave us a list of things that Green River could be doing to elevate Black voices and Black people in ways that might make Black people more comfortable on our campus, our peers to feel safer, more comfortable. Many of those things on the list have not been addressed to this day.
To this day, yeah. That is challenging. Do you remember that? I remember the list. I'm looking at Amanda.
Did you not?
You were heading up the Black Caucus at that time.
Did you not forget that? I was the one typing.
I know.
And getting us together as formation. For us in our mind, this was crazy to me. It was simple when we came together. It was simple. It was almost back to the love language, how simple it is for white culture to understand it and latch on and bring community. For us, these simple steps to do for us in our community was simple, but realizing that in dominant culture that may not have been simple because you don't have a community as we center community. And yes, we will fight with each other, we will disagree with each other, but there's a sense of community that we come together on things and that it is written, certain things we just don't tolerate in our community. And it's unspoken rules that are there that it's not formed. So I'm realizing more and more the years that I was sitting at Green River, I was like, why is this, they're not getting this, they're not understanding, they're not figuring this out. And I come to the conclusion, like, you don't have a foundation and we're not speaking the same foundation language. And I have to figure out your foundation language to actually compare. And that's what I loved that you did. You spoke a language of, I'm going to talk about love language. And I'm going to root it in there so you can understand it and simplify it so I can translate it to my community to build community. Because there's no community, as you said, it's like, I'm white, you're white. That's all we have in common. And that surface level where you can't compare, where I can meet a complete stranger walking down Seattle and we can nod and acknowledge, say hello. There is a commonality value that we acknowledge each other. And we don't know anything else, but there's an acknowledgement because culturally we see each other because other people didn't see each other. And we take all of that root of seeing each other and nodding at each other is because of the fact that from slavery time we learned that history. Or when Black men, dab each other up, that came from the military times of acknowledging them too. So we rooted in some of the histories of that to bring culture that we've been stripped from, and we're piecing it together in that sense. But it brings it back to white people didn't have to.
Right.
That's true.
I think I want to give props to both my wife and my daughter. My daughter helped me with the infographic, setting them up, the first one. And my wife is an anti-racist scholar who most of our dinner time conversations revolve around issues in America and racism and anti-Blackness in particular, and addressing sort of issues that indigenous populations face, the erasure. With respect to that list that the Black Caucus shared, and I have a copy of it, I think sometimes that Green River struggles to do anything more than one thing. For a long time, everyone's on board for CTC Link. We can't focus on anything but CTC Link. And now all we can focus on is the budget. And I would like for us to be able to sort of walk and chew gum at the same time. I think that there's no reason why we can't be addressing the budget and still focus on our mission. Because we're not focusing on our mission.
Right. Yeah.
We can sort of speak to the law, and in emails we'll say, oh, we stand by this. Well, that's the law. You have to stand by that. We can do more than just following the law when it comes to discrimination. I don't think we're doing anything more than just the very bare minimum.
And I know that we've talked about this even in several of our segments, talking about how the work has to happen for us to change. And right now, they're still just pretty words on a page, you know. When I do orientation for new employees, a lot of them say, I came here because, wow, your mission, your vision, your equity statement, your core value, they relate to all of that, but then they get here and they're like,
and I want to make I want to make clear, it's the work. White people should be doing the work.
Right.
It's our job. It's our work. In coordination or by listening to our Black peers. Right. I can listen to my Black peers and be like, okay, this is what we may need to do to, you know, ensure that there's always more than one Black person in a room. Right. And then we have the issue of like the hiring and the retention of our Black peers, because we don't retain people as well as we retain other demographics.
Right, exactly. So that was one of our sessions was around that. The other one that I really enjoyed was words of affirmation, which I thought was great. And I'm just going to read a little bit here. We often hear the refrain, why can't we all just get along? Or if only people were nicer to each other. There's certainly value in being nice, but approaching this through an anti-racist lens requires more, which I absolutely love that statement. Expecting niceness fails to recognize the presence and harms of systemic barriers and silences communities of color in our white supremacist spaces. The systemically dominant or those who benefit from unearned privilege must be more intentional. Love that. So I guess let's talk a little bit about how do we then, and we've been kind of saying this all along, how do we kind of bring those voices, get those voices more? And Lindsay Smith is another one on our campus who's been doing some great work around lifting up Black voices and really focused on creating that space. What other, I guess when I think, and I'm just brought her up because it just hit me in the head, I need to make sure I mentioned that, but when I hear this, why can't we all get along? I'm just like, well, why can't we?
It's not that simple.
It's not that simple. That's what exactly.
It's more complex than that, because going back to the first one, if you're going to do acts of service in this work, that means you're selfless. That means that it's not about you, what you gain from it. It's about the other person. And if you're serving someone and that is what you want to do, you have to realize that you can't get anything back from it. And we are in a society of, if I scratch your back, you scratch my back. If I grease the wheels for you, you're going to grease the wheels for me. And to be in a society, if someone serves and gives you something without, you don't have to give anything back, is a culture shock, because we live in a capitalist society where we bargain with each other with something in that. And then when we talk about affirmation words, there's a lot of people who are battling depression, anxiety. You got people with so much trauma that they may not recognize all their trauma and what they bring to the table. Even if you put the mirror up to them, they don't see that they have some of these issues that are inside them. And I think that it's hard for some people to give affirmations and words of encouragement because they never got it before.
That's true.
Excuse me. I think that if we are, if we are pro-Black on campus, if we are pro-indigeneity, if we uplift our Asian American and Asian voices, I think we all benefit from that. You know, it's like I'm going to benefit from that. I'm going to sort of benefit because my peers are going to be giving their best, and they're not going to be traumatized. And I'm speaking very simplistic. I hope I'm probably dumbing this down to some degree, but we'll all benefit from that. I mean, I think we all benefit when we're truly more equitable than we have been. Something you mentioned, Amanda, about the trauma and all of that makes me think about how when every week we'd have an hour Zoom call, I thought that people were going to be asking me to sort of talk about the infographics and the links and the trainings that I sort of point people to. Mostly people just wanted to be in community with each other. And while I anticipated mostly white people showing up, people all demographics showed up in this space.
Yeah.
And we just held space for each other. And I was really moved by that. It made my job easier because I didn't have to, I was always nervous, what am I going to bring to this conversation more than what's on the infographic? But people just wanted to be in space together.
Yeah.
And then I thought to myself, why hasn't Green River created spaces such as these? Except, in all fairness, Marc Brown, your work, you have.
Thank you.
Through the racial, I'm going to get the title wrong, but the
Truth, racial healing.
Truth, racial healing. It always seems to fall on a day that I'm not on campus, but that has been something that I think is that space. But there seems to be, we need more spaces like that.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And that's one of the things I'm hoping going into next year, the next school year, that we'll hopefully be able to do more of that. One of the things that we just did a community conversations on Wednesday, and one of the things that came out of that was talking about how when we think about affirmations, one of the things that came out of that was trying to remember it's like a Ubuntu, I don't know, it's UBUNTU.
Ubuntu. It's sort of like it's sort of the African "you are my other me."
Yeah, you are my other me, or if you're okay, I'm okay. That whole feeling, and Miriam does that very well. Miriam, Dr. Chatika here on campus does that very well. It's like that's always the first thing out of her mouth is, if you're okay, I'm okay. And so I love that kind of idea. That to me is an affirmation of we're together, as opposed. And I oftentimes feel like our campus we're just, the 7 years I've been here, it just doesn't feel like there are pockets of togetherness, I think, on our campus.
Agreed.
But I think that as a campus, we're not together. And that's always been something that I have tried to strive for in terms of building a culture where we are together. Because as we say in our HR group, we ain't nothing without each other.
Yeah.
So
we've got a lot of healing to do.
There's a lot of healing to do. So, and I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. But it's interesting how when you created the space of like, okay, I got to do this agenda, I have to do all of this. And it just reminded me when I started in the Black Caucus lead of like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to have this agenda. And then just having space, it was crazy of just like no agenda really, maybe like 2 updates I said, but it changed to so much healing and people bring up their trauma and I'm battling this, to what kind of hair products do you use which you can buy, to you should try this restaurant. It just opened the space up because people need a space. And it's interesting how simple a Zoom just opening it up and people coming in, and it can be as simple as playing music to having full-blown conversations about what people need, or people need affirmations. I know that a lot of times when I did the Zoom meetings, a lot of people needed, like, I need someone to validate me because I'm going crazy over here of the gaslighting. I need someone to tell me that, I'm valuable. Like, I need words to say, like, I remember I did something for one of the faculty members for their tenure track, and they needed me to write something for them because they were part of the workshops. And so that was part of and so I typed it up, and they were like, I haven't heard such kind words about myself through this process. And it's the first time seeing someone write something. I said, of course, like, you're doing the stuff. You're an amazing human being. You have the heart to do this work. But when you're so much stripped in white supremacist culture and you're coming in there and there's nobody telling you that you did good today. Like, I see you. Like, I recognize your whole self, where parts of it that gets chipped off. Coming here. And so I don't think that's also a recognition that some people come here, as I mentioned, like, trauma comes from this institution. There's people who have been hurt and harmed, and the reaction to hurt and harm sometimes is not healing through that process. They may be going through the whole process of anger and grief and all the emotion in that, and no one wants to just acknowledge, like, hey, that person's been through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, they are wrong for saying what they've been saying to you, but you need to recognize this institution hurt them. They've been keeping this in, and you just opened that wound, and you didn't realize you opened that wound, but you opened a wound in that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing too, though, is that some people don't keep it in, and they create that trauma for others, which is sad. So you have that; it becomes a cycle of what I would call abuse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we have a cycle of doing that. You did an amazing job, you know, and Amanda's already said it, like the agenda and everything, but you just allowed us such great opportunities to just share. And it just evolved organically, which I loved, because it wasn't like, you know, sometimes you go and it's like it's planned well, and then I always hear then, like, when it's all planned out, that's kind of a white supremacist approach to things, you know. So just the mere fact that you just said, here's the topic, here's what we're talking about, and then you just let us go.
Yeah.
And that was so amazing. And I think there was so much love and genuine conversation around because of that. It was so important. So for that, I thank you.
I mean, there were some wonderful people in those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
There were.
You being one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
But it speaks of how people felt safe enough to speak around you.
Yeah.
So that also is an indicator to me that if you don't think you're doing the work, that people feel, and different cultures feel comfortable, Marc, in a Zoom meeting, talking and sharing life with you, it's a signal that they trust you.
Yep. That's exactly right.
And I think that sometimes your white peers are like, I don't know, like, if this, but I also don't know what's the sign of, like, Black people or different communities trusting you. It's the fact that they can feel vulnerable enough to talk openly and not be judged.
Yeah.
I think you speak to the idea that maybe Green River needs to allow for more time and maybe less agenda-driven spaces to build more trust, to start again and build trust, because that's something that I learned, again, from my wife. My wife, in some of the meetings she has, in the spaces she's operating in, they spend a lot of time just building trust before they even get to the agenda.
Yeah. And that, I think that means more, and we talk about that. I've talked about that in some of the leadership classes that I'm doing. We talk about how important trust is, but then, you know, then I have to go back and say, are we doing the things to create it? Because you don't just trust people.
Nope.
You have to work at it. There has to be some sort of work that goes into, are you being transparent? Are you being honest with whatever it might be? Are you being fair and equitable? Are you doing, you know, those are the kinds of things that will start to show that you can be trusted.
But practice humility?
Practice, yes.
Being vulnerable?
Vulnerable, thank you. All the words, those are all the words that I use. But those are the things that make a difference.
Yeah.
And even in our leadership roles, we all have to, those are qualities that people are going to look for, and that's when people will follow and they will trust. But you have to work at that. It doesn't come automatically. I remember having somebody ask me, so how was the question? It had to do with trust, but basically, how do we make people trust? So you can't train them to trust. You can't train people to trust. You just can't. That's just not, that's got to come from you outwardly. So, yeah.
See you build trust through your actions, right?
Exactly.
Demonstrate who you are, and then trust.
And then trust will come.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's missing. We got to do better at that, you know, at all levels. That's across the board.
Yeah.
So.
And I think with trust is watching people at the lowest points and the hard decisions that they have to make, and what kind of integrity do they really have that I can trust you.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
that's what's showing. I feel like that's what's showing up in the environment, is that there's a lack of trust, is because people feeling like your morals and your values that you say that you have and that you're aligned with the institution is not what is translating and matching up. And so there's a disconnect. And when trust is broken, it comes to a scarcity mindset for some people. Some people fight, some people retrieve, some people just grieve and just numb themselves and keep on pushing. And I think when you have that space of people with wherever they're at with life and situations, they're feeling enough safe to open up and be vulnerable with some people they may have not met, and some people they have, where they can see the courage in them to say, this is how I'm feeling today. This is what I'm scared about. This is what my emotion is. This is what I'm bringing to the table today.
You just made me think of one of the sort of the hallmarks of the ways in which white people might behave around their peers of color, and that is this idea of overfamiliarity, like without sort of earning, say, trust. And I was guilty of that when in one of our interactions a couple years ago, where I made some sort of joke about, like, well, this got me an invite to the cookout. And you didn't know me from, Adam, really. We didn't know each other. And here I was being overfamiliar. And so I'm conscious of that, like that we can do things such as overfamiliarity that can stymie any opportunity or chance for trust. Right?
Yeah.
I was like, here this another white man trying to get to our cookout, trying to put raisins in the potato salad. No, I was just like...
You get the invitation. You do get the invitation.
You're Marc's plus one. No, but it's the notion of, like, this work I do, am I gaining something from it?
Yeah.
And I think that notion in white culture is, like, it's predominant in white supremacists. Is like, we gave you guys all this stuff. It should be enough. We gave you the Civil Rights Act bill. Our ancestors fought for your rights. And it's like, can we talk about the basics that you started this and now you're saying that you helped me? You created these laws. You made these rules up. And now it doesn't benefit you anymore, and more people are yelling and crying out to you. Now you want to be the savior, but you are also the person who put me here. This is where I'm like, I don't get what you're saying when you tell me this of, like, well, we've done enough. You created this.
Yeah, that's true.
And we're trying to figure out your plans of what you've created. And you change the rules all the time. And we're all adjusting. And I think now in this environment, white people are adjusting, and they're not used to adjusting. Where black people are like, well, yeah, duh.
We're going to go learn a new dance.
We're on version, 175 of the white supremacist handbook of how to survive white America. Okay, you change this to this. Okay, we're bringing this back. Okay, here, everybody, here's the new book. Proceed, learn some new dances to get you some joy. But at the end of the day, it's like, you created the structure. And now you don't like your structure. It's what it's coming to.
And these systems are still in place. All the systems, the housing, the banking. They're all still there.
Yeah, they are, definitely.
Very, very little has really shifted or changed from my perspective. From what I see.
That's true. You brought up familiarity. I think I enunciated that properly. Then that when you said that, I was thinking about going back to my parents, and I remember several times going shopping with my parents or something, and my mother would maybe write a check, or back in the days when you wrote checks, and the person behind the counter would more often than not say, "Oh, well, Margaret," and my mother would stop them dead in their tracks and say, "Mrs. Brown." And that was a cultural thing, because when you go back, that's what they didn't look at black folks as I don't know what the word would be, as human for the most part, but always by familiarity, first name. It was never like a formal way of approaching that, and so. And that just, when you said that, I was just like, oh wow, that's true. That familiarity that people have, like there's just this feeling like we can just we can just say anything or do anything.
And we see that on campus when people don't address some of our exec team who are black by their titles.
Yeah, and I think, and that's, so I kind of struggle because there are times when I call Dr. Davis, or in some cases I feel like, and I generally will ask, it's like, how will you, like Miriam, Dr. Chatiga, she's like flat out, don't just call me Miriam, and I appreciate that. So I bounce back and forth with Dr. Davis, just depending on the, where I'm at. I did it, but I agree. I think even for me as a black person addressing the same thing with Dr. Greer, the other thing, it's just like you get familiar with them, and then you're not sure, like, even as a black person sometimes I'm not sure.
But there's a point where I think it shifts.
Because, I agree.
Like this familiarity of, like when I was hearing about like professionalism, and it's like, you can, what is professionalism anymore?
Right.
And it's like, you can put a jeans and t-shirts on that, this is what we're calling professionalism. But some of our black employees get treated like students, not employees. There's a difference. So
there is a difference.
It's okay for you to wear your Green River sweatshirt and jeans and call it white supremacist if you don't wear like a suit and tie, but it comes back to your ancestors created these rules that us black people have to follow, and we don't get the same privilege as you do, and the courteous of that, because we get treated differently. And I think this notion of like, you want to talk about white supremacists when it comes to clothing, professionalism, when you talk about teaching and academics, when people want to talk more about pedagogy and bringing that to the classroom. I think that's amazing. But you set the educational standards. Like, you told us all of this. And now you're now we're going to take this back, and now we're going to pick which pedagogy we're going to actually validate in this season, because it's becoming in the United States a lot of times different flavors. So like, okay, the black people are the flavor of the season, right? Now the Asians are on there. Now we're looking at the indigenous. It's like, you're splitting us all up, and we're like, as you mentioned, like, I want you to walk and chew bubblegum. I want you to acknowledge both things exist at once, and cultures have different cultures away. And you can have one student with multiple cultures that showing up in their lives that you're going to have to acknowledge things. But you were never taught that, because again, your educational system said white dominant. Your educational system said that Columbus discovered everything. Like, these are the things that you learned in that sense. But you created it, and now your familiarity is like, this is our new norm, and it's like, but it's not for us, because we get treated when we try to be the same with you.
We get treated,
and that's where equity comes in, where I feel like the acknowledgement part
that's true
of the privilege you have to wear your sweatshirt and your jeans at Green River and still be considered an employee instead of a student.
Or looked down upon, even, just, and that was one of the things my dad always said, and I think I shared this in one of our podcasts, but I remember going to, I got a position at a corporate office, and my dad's like, well, what do you wear? And I said, well, it's very casual. It's a younger company, and they don't dress up. They don't wear suits and ties or anything. And he's like, boy, you better dress up. I'll just never forget that. And I always knew my dad was always meticulous about how he dressed and what that setting looked like, and so thinking about just how people dress is another thing, of how what that impression, or what impression you're leaving. And so I've always maintained this very a standard for myself. I don't dress all the way up necessarily, like jacket and everything, but I try to make sure that I think I've worn jeans here maybe 3 times that I can think of.
I think for me, when I was at Green River, tennis shoes was like three
times. See?
But the first thing my mom would always tell me, what are you wearing?
What are you wearing? Yeah.
Because presentation matters.
Presentation matters.
In that sense. So I think those things culturally, again, comes back.
It just comes back.
And that's why I think in this environment, the playing field is not the same, but people feel like the playing field is the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where the break off with a lot of communities of color are like, we are not in the same field.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're in a different field, you're in a different league.
Yep.
In a sense, you know, if we're looking at, you know, Pac-10 school, we're not in the Pac-10. Okay? Yeah. In that sense. Right. And I think that bringing back for the work you're doing is amazing because it's I'm centralizing community, but I'm also trying to figure out how do we collectively heal from our trauma in a community space where we're holding each other accountable, we're listening and we're serving each other, but we're also affirming each other all together as a whole. But we also need to acknowledge we're all coming from different walks and to respect and amplify. And I always love that you always center Black voices. Like, that has never left you. Like, since I've known you, like, here at Green River, you have always been Black voices has been at the centerfold. Like, you have never wavered on that topic. And I admire you for that. Because there's a lot of people who would be like, okay, we're done with Black people. Now let's go save the Indigenous. And for you, it always has been like Black voices, and then let's add Indigenous with me too.
Bring people
in there. So I can I can chew gum and walk at the same time because I need to acknowledge those voices at the table. So I greatly appreciate that, Marc.
Definitely.
Thank you.
So what's next? I put you on the spot.
So for the flyer I created, basically it has to live online because I created hyperlinks.
Right.
So what I thought I could do is literally put QR codes to some of the resources. So that's something with respect to the infographics.
Right.
I don't know. I'm working with a statewide group of white people whose name I sort of always cringe at. It's white people working on it, but that is.
Oh my God!
That's their sort of internal name. It's just,
I got it.
You know,
no, that's okay. That's okay. That's
I had to sort of see some sort of some control over that. I'm like, okay, I'll go with that. And so we're working to work on this statewide and figure out ways in which we can share some of the things that we might be doing at Green River that work with other schools.
Great. That sounds great. I love that. And if there's anything
and also
we can
to add that you're with the Faculty of Staff Color Conference working in collaboration with some of the committee work and how we could come as a collective community. And I'm very excited to see what we're going to be developing together in this work because I think it's important to have community in this work. And yes, the space is for people of color. I will acknowledge that always. It's our space. But in this season, we're going to need our white brothers and sisters to come as a protection layer because they're coming for us more and more. And it's a scary time for a lot of people of color of what they're going through and needing to step up in those spaces and to learn and to have your space as your own, and I respect that, but also be in community with us and how we could all build what you build online, like a space of trust where different cultures come together, sitting at the table and feeling enough vulnerability and safeness to talk. And I think that is the beautiful aspect that I'm excited to see to form and grow too.
Thank you both, because I've learned from both of you over the years, and I value your knowledge, who you are. Very, very sad that you left, Amanda. But I understand. I mean, as much as I can understand, I'm like, okay. And I think I'm going to guess that hopefully you're thriving, and that's all I would want for anyone, but especially you.
Thank you so much.
All right. So we just always. This might be your second one, so you'll have one for your wife.
No, it's not my second one. No, this is great. No.
Oh, I can give you one to give your wife then.
Thank you so much. I know she would love this.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you everyone for enjoying our episode with Marc Barrington. And hope to see you guys again.
Yep.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.